Listen, if you are married, newly married, or you are married with children, or you plan to have children, this information is for you. I want to talk to you about two questions that I wish I had known to ask my licensed insurance agent before I got a policy for myself and my husband. Now, I will preface this by saying I did not do adequate research about the questions that would probably be beneficial for me in my situation. So I just went into it listening to what they had to say, not quite understanding all the terms that they were talking about. And I just picked what sounded good. I feel that he did his part. I did not do my part by researching what I needed to research so I could ask the right questions and he could give me the right information. So I'm just going to say that. First question I would ask, if we're married, okay, we don't have any kids yet, is there a way to get a policy that's going to cover both of us? Or are we going to have to, basically get a separate policy for each of us? This is a valid question. I wish I had known to ask this because my husband and I both just went ahead and got a policy for both of us, which there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes you are maybe on a budget or you just don't necessarily need it as much. And so you just want to make sure that you guys are covered if anything happens to one of you. And so with this, and I'm just giving definitions, I'm not giving advice. I highly recommend that you talk to your licensed agent in your state because rules can vary from state to state. But an option that would have been available to us is to get a joint term policy, meaning it's called a joint term, but it's also known a first to die policy. So if you are married and it's just you and your spouse, basically whoever passes away first, the second person becomes the beneficiary. Now, they also have something called a survivorship policy, which is also known as a second to die policy. So what this means is if your husband passes away unexpectedly and maybe you find out you're pregnant later on, a survivorship policy is meant to have a beneficiary outside of your other spouse, of course. And so let's say you've got kids now, you have the second to die policy, the kids become the beneficiary, you're covered if you pass away, and then they have money to make sure all things are taken care of. So those are options where it's basically like a 2-for-1 policy. There is also an option of becoming a rider onto a policy. So if you guys are married, again, maybe you're on a budget or you just don't feel like you really need the whole life type of insurance, you can ask to be added on, or you can ask to have a spouse added onto your policy as a rider, and it's known as a spouse rider. Okay, and a rider is just someone that you can add onto your policy for an additional price. In this term, it's pretty specific. So spouse, basically your spouse. Now, let's say that you are married for a while and you guys start to have kids, and you say, we want to make sure our whole family is covered. Again, may not have a complete budget to get an individual policy for each kid that we have. If you got 6 kids, that adds up really quickly. It's important coverage, but maybe you're just not there and you can't do it that way. So an option available to you is to also get riders for your children, meaning if you have term insurance is where you get a life insurance policy that covers a certain amount of time. So they have 10, 20, 30 years. Let's say you do a 30-year policy. You just had a kid when you started this 30-year policy. And then as your kids get older, they're basically covered if there was an unexpected loss, but they may have the option to convert this temporary policy that's only covering for 30 years into a permanent whole life policy. And that means it's going to cover their whole life as long as they pay the premium. That gives them that option. So here are a couple of questions I wish I had known to ask. That way he could have given me adequate information. I may or may have not made a different choice. I am happy with the policy that I have. I know that my family is covered, my husband is covered, and that at the end of the day, we have what we need to make sure our family is protected. So listen, if you like this information and it helped you at all, please drop a comment below. Let me know any questions you may have, or maybe you've heard a term and you don't quite understand it. I'd love to explain it to you the best way possible. Also, if you find that you have more questions than you do answers, I have a book that's called Questions Now or Regrets Later, and it's geared to help families ask the right questions, primarily before a life event happens. But if you find that you're in the middle of a life event or after the fact, these are really great for that as well. So my name's Lucretia. I want to thank you for listening to what I have to say, and I will see you guys in my next video. And stay tuned because my next video will be over whole life versus term. Talk to you soon.